expecting, the markets are pricing in a rate cut, not a rate hike. Economists think that they still might actually go ahead and hike interest rates over the course of the next couple of years. But markets are seeing probably a 50-50 chance of a rate cut within a year's time.
Right.
It's questionable how much that might be translated into mortgage rates, but certainly the markets are thinking it's possible.
It's all right, Marion. George says it's okay. We don't need to rush.
You and your mortgages. There's a joke and a half. I was going to say, George, thank you very much indeed from Martin Lewis and myself. Martin Lewis, for your international audience, is
I think
financial consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's fascinating. If you talk to, and you have these conversations, Francesco, I'm sure you do, with investors outside of the UK who are just looking at the UK as a property market opportunity sometime once we get this resolution of the Brexit story.
You're right, but the moment to get into this type of markets is not when the resolution is done. That is too late. It is when actually there is still uncertainty. And I agree with you. These are, when you look at the international markets, some opportunities are here.
We're going to leave it there. George, nice to see you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Just safe to say, make sure you join us at 12:55 CET for decision time. Look, a whole cast there. Willem, Juliana. Anyway, meantime, what's going on? Right, the chairman and co-founder of European FinTech TransferWise, Jeff.
Well, he's been talking to CNBC. The company is shifting its attention toward profits following WeWork's failed IPO. Chairman Taavet Hinrichs says the company is focused on long-term growth.
I do think there was a time when growth was much more important than profitability. And I think investors may have forgotten to even think about if a given model can be profitable. Like, I have no problem with companies investing for future growth and profitability down the road, but you have to make sure you're operating in a sound model which can become profitable.
Yeah, isn't it astonishing, Elizabeth, how quickly we are now talking about making profit in many businesses, rather than, it's okay, we'll be relaxed about that. We can just grow our market before we have to worry about profitability.
It's certainly been a shift, Jeff. That's right. We've heard about how companies have been able to just focus on that growth because there's a lot of funding in private markets. A couple of these big IPOs that we've seen recently, Uber and Lyft, that had those massive losses. You mentioned WeWork, of course, that failed IPO. They've kind of shed light on this idea that you might need to be making money too. So we're here to talk with a tech startup. You are in the enterprise software business, customer experience, unifying different kind of channels for the customer, for companies specifically. Let's talk about your valuation. You're most recently valued, Rajiv Thomas, Sprinkler CEO and founder. You were most recently valued at $1.8 billion. Can you update us on where you stand today?
That was 3 years ago. What we've disclosed publicly is we'll do north of $300 million in ARR this year, and we have 1,700 employees in 24 offices in 16 countries. We stick to the fundamentals of building a business, build an amazing product, solve a great problem for customers, and take good care of customers. And valuations are superfluous. Like, we don't worry about what the valuation is. We stick to growing the business, and we've had a record year and a record quarter, and we continue to add customers and take care of them.
Where do you stand on plans for an IPO?
At over $300 million, it's obvious that we're a good candidate, and that's a logical next step for us in terms of funding milestones. We have not announced a timeline yet, but possibly in the next 12 to 24 months.
12 to 24 months looking to start the IPO process.
Right.
And has the recent kind of weakness in some of the IPOs that we've seen in the tech sector across the industry, software, hardware in general, has that given you pause in the ability and interest in going public?
We've always been very lucky in that we've had way more inbound interest in terms of funding that we could take money for. I don't personally think of the IPO as a destination. It's just more of a milestone, and you're raising money from public investors as opposed to private ones. And I think the key is to always focus on the fundamentals of the business. We don't worry too much about the market, and I think you have to worry about the market if you're thinking in 6, 12, 18, 24 month increments. And I like to think of our business in 5, 10, 15, 25 years, and I don't think short-term market investor sentiment matters as much as really focusing on customers and solving big problems for them.
Let's talk about the customers that you're trying to solve problems for. Some, massive clients, McDonald's, for example. What exactly are you doing to help a customer like that? Especially, we've seen a company like that with executive shakeups just in the last week. From a social media kind of crisis management perspective, what's your role there?
These companies, these large brands, global brands, 9 of the 10 of the world's most valuable brands use Sprinklr. What we do for them is very simple. Today, consumers have shifted from using email and the phone to using Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and LinkedIn. What people don't realize is there are 23 social media channels. There are 11 messaging channels. There is chat. There's, Apple iMessage. There's Google Messages. There's all kinds of modern channels that consumers are using today, and businesses need a way to reach, engage, and listen to consumers on these channels and customers on these channels. That's what we do for them. So if you want to do marketing, if you want to do advertising, if you want to do research, if you want to do customer care, if you want to do customer engagement or crisis management, across these channels, which are becoming the primary way to do business, you need a platform like Sprinklr. And our differentiator is that we provide all of these on one unified platform, as opposed to you having to run around and buy 15 or 20 of them. If you're a large company, you're spending half your life doing RFPs for these little point solutions. And we give you the way I see it, is the first unified front office platform for all modern channels.
Interesting space to watch. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on it. Rajiv Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. Sprinklr CEO and founder here from Web Summit. We'll be talking about tech regulation coming up throughout the next hour, guys. Lots of that with the big tech companies here at presence in Lisbon. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Coming up on the show, we're going to speak to the CEO of Solvay as the Belgian company swings to a net loss in the third quarter, but really fascinating results. Ilham Kadri is waiting on the phone when we return.
Spot a bargain in the Debenhams Spectacular event. Up to 30% off throughout the store and up to 15% off beauty and fragrance. Shop now in store and at debenhams.com.
This winter, why not take the short flight from London to Dublin with Aer Lingus from just $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. From coastal walks to cozy pubs and friendly locals, you'll find so much to enjoy once you're there. Smart takes a Dublin city break. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Terms and conditions apply.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
This is someone making an online booking at Ford.co.uk using the words Ford20 so they can service their Ford for £20 less. And this is someone who didn't get their Ford serviced. You see, at Ford, we use Ford genuine parts and Ford trained technicians. Plus, if you quote Ford20 when you book with us online, you can receive £20 off. Book now at Ford.co.uk or visit your local participating dealer. Ford service. No one knows your Ford better.
Retail customers only. At participating Ford dealers. Cannot be used with other promotions. T's and C's apply. Search Ford Service for more information.
Hello, Vitality Health Insurance.
Oh, hi. Is it true if I join Vitality I get de facto 5-star rated cover, can speak to a GP 24/7, get rewarded for staying active with things like Starbucks coffee, get a little sausage dog to live with me, and you could beat my current premium by up to 10%?
Absolutely. Except one of those.
It's the dog, isn't it?
Yeah.
it's time to review your health insurance. Just search Vitality Health. Vitality. Positively different. Minimum monthly premiums, terms and conditions apply.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Start hearing more of what you want. Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Right, the Belgian chemical firm Solvay has swung to a net loss in the third quarter following a €656 million impairment charge. Solvay has warned developments in the US oil market will impact underlying growth in its specialty solutions unit. And yet, Ilham Kadri, the CEO of Solvay, very nice to see you today. Your shares up to date this year are up 18%. And I've just been on your website and I've noticed you have 265 different products as well. So are the products that are expanding in the growth areas offsetting those concerns in areas such as the US energy industry?
Hi, well, thank you for having me. Well, as you know, it's a big day for us. We are just announcing our quarter three, of course, and confirming our full year guidance and narrowing the guidance for the full year, but we are also sharing our strategy. And we are very, very happy and I'm excited to launch the growth strategy around growing the material cluster and the new reporting cluster called material around investment in high margin materials. The R stands for resilient cash and will continue delivering resilient cash for the chemicals new cluster. And then the O finally is about optimizing returns in our solution cluster and unlock the value. And all of this is about enhancing and creating shareholder value.
Yeah, I mean, I was also looking on your website at the vast amount of markets you cover. I mean, just to give our viewers a bit of a smattering: coatings, agriculture, automotive, all over the place, feed industry, food industry. Do you have the right portfolio at the moment? I noticed the figures on cash flow and the improvement you're expecting there, but do you have the right portfolio? Are there areas of the business you need to ditch, others you need to invest more heavily in?
Yeah, well, this is why we conducted a fulsome strategic review, right? And we did this resegmentation to really, put our businesses in the right segment with the right management principles. So this cluster one now, materials, is about growing the top line. They are high margin businesses. The second one is chemicals. They are monotechnologies and is about delivering increasing resilient cash. And the number three, the solutions. This is where we need to improve our returns. And the diversification of the portfolio, and you've seen it this year, has allowed us with scale and diversification to go through the challenges financially, build more customer relationship across the portfolio, and thanks to our portfolio, we have a global reach with global presence in all continents.
The challenge here, though, is how do you manage the cost reduction program that you're announcing today and maintain growth with current lines of business? The organic EBITDA outlook looks negative from what you've said at this point. So what job losses are we going to see? How are you going to cut and trim whilst maintaining forward momentum?
Well, I mean, an eye on the microscope and an eye on the telescope. On the microscope, we delivered on the commitments for the year. Solid execution, very glad with our teams. They've delivered, we are resilient. We've been managing what we can control, costs, our relationship with our customers, and we worked on our working capital, like I told you in our quarter one call. Now, the new operating model, we are launching what I call Solvay One to unleash the full potential of the group. This is about centrally managed resources, and this is new in the company. We are managing resources centrally, prioritizing the deployment of CapEx research to the highest growth opportunities. And then we are really enhancing the operational efficiency. What you can imagine with this diversified portfolio is that we have the opportunity to leverage supply chain, for example, across the board. We are in the indirect spend. We are leveraging and we have opportunities to really build a repeatable cost and cash playbook. And this is what we are launching today, Solvay One, the new operating model for the group.
Great to have you on the programme. Thanks very much for joining us. Ilham Kadri, the CEO of Solvay. Let's move forward. Francesco stays with us. We'll pick up and get more comments from him. And as we head into the open, quick recap then of the German blue chip earnings. Siemens shares seen opening higher. It beat fourth quarter estimates. The German conglomerate saw industrial operating profit jump 20%. Commerzbank expects full year revenue to come in lower than in 2018. This despite posting a 35% jump in third quarter net profit. Lufthansa shares seen opening higher. The German airline posted better than expected third quarter results. And shares in Deutsche Telekom are seen opening lower despite the group raising its guidance.
Plenty more still to come, including Europe's largest brick maker. Heimo Scheuch, the CEO, will join us from Wienerberger as well. But safe to say, look at that. It's looking very solid. And that came from nowhere, really, seeing as the markets were called flat on the opening calls. We'll go through the individual corporates, the wealth, the plethora, the cacophony of numbers after a short break.
Now get greedy whenever you want. Subscribe to the American Greed.
We just got back from a beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. Next, we donned our skates for Bath on Ice. I'm a natural. Didn't have to hold on to anything. Or anyone. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
It's another Thursday morning. Yet another windy day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and relax with 365 beautiful beaches.
So yes, sir, what would you like to have?
Fly from London Gatwick to Antigua with British Airways from £223 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, London Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
A dark Thursday morning. Suddenly, everything goes pitch black. You're driving blind. What evil lurks in the gloom? What hides in the shadows around that corner, beyond that bend? Will you ever feel safe again? Course you will. Come to Halfords. We fit new headlight bulbs on the spot from just £8. And we're open late 7 days a week. See halfords.com for opening hours. Here in Chiswick. Ready for longer nights? Ready for anything. Halfords. For life's journeys.
Bulbs sold separately. Selected vehicles only. In most stores. Opening times vary.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and V Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Ladies and gents, may I introduce a magical number? 25! Oh yes, 25 UK millionaires guaranteed in this Friday's Euro Millions.
Euro Millions, celebrating 25 years of the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
I've got to be honest with you. I do like talking about the macro. I like talking about Brexit. I like talking about Boris Johnson, about Xi Jinping, about Mr. Trump. But what I really like doing is rolling up my sleeves and talking about the stuff that I was trained to talk about all those years ago. And that is markets, that is numbers, that is economics. And I think there are so many amazing things happening in today's session at least. I mean, what an amazing job I've got. You know, I speak to my accountants friends or my consultancy friends. What'd you do today? Oh, I did 15 hours on this project. Whereas I get to speak to all these amazing CEOs and amazing guests and get a real gauge on what's going on in the world. So, and I have had that this morning. And also just looking at the data as well. I mean, you know, just pouring through those productivity and labour report figures yesterday. If you haven't done it, do it. They were really interesting. There was a real pickup in labor costs for US companies. Yeah, if you haven't looked at it, it's not 2%, it's not 3%, it's about 4.5% year on year. The 5-year average is only up 2.8%. If that isn't a great big fat signal for something, then I don't know what it is, especially if it becomes a trend. It may just be an outlier, maybe just be an odd figure, but it's worthy of your attention as well, as indeed are these corporates today, which have led this market 0.3% higher. So let's go into a little bit more detail and have a look at the sectors. As we've been hearing from Francesco Curto earlier on, there is vicious rotation. There is rotation into value stocks as well, and we're seeing this on a daily basis. For example, just tell you, early in the week, my producer Gillian and I, we were talking about Chevron going up, and we were looking at the big rotation into the oil stocks as well, because the oil price was rallying as well, and all kinds of other things were going on. Now, complete reversal on energy sector yesterday compared with healthcare. Healthcare up here, energy was the laggard, down couple of percent plus as well. So the speed and the viciousness of this rotation is really quite interesting, isn't it? Great opportunity to make and to lose money, I'd suggest. So look, flat, and then we get to the higher beta sectors which are moving today. Autos, technology, basic resources and banks are all moving higher. And I would suggest to you there are very differentiated numbers coming up. For instance, this banking sector today. I mean, I was doing a little bit of a tear sheet analysis of UniCredit versus Commerzbank earlier on as well. And yet it depends about your expectations. We're talking about banks that have a price to book of 0.45 of 1% for UniCredit and 0.25 for Commerzbank. So they can say a lot of negative stuff and people go, yeah, I know that. Look at the valuation. But if they say something that's mildly encouraging, what does that mean for the share prices? We'll have a look, shall we? Let's have a look at the European bourses first as well. We have a whole host of indices which are moving up. There you go. FTSE MIB about 0.6 and 1%. I'm guessing UniCredit's part of that. But I'm told there are some fascinating Chinese Commerce Ministry flashes. They're fascinating. Sell it, Jeffrey.
Let's give you these. The Chinese Commerce Ministry says China and the US have kept in close communication. And they hope both sides will appropriately address each other's concerns. The ministry says tariffs should be cancelled for the Phase 1 agreement. The degree to which they should be cancelled can be negotiated. China and the US have agreed to cancel existing tariffs in different phases. If China and the US reach a Phase 1 trade deal, both sides must cancel existing tariffs at the same time with the same proportion based on agreement. And the fact is, Steve, to me that doesn't sound like this deal is locked down. And we've been making the point all morning that while the market has been fixated on the idea that the timing and location are the critical issues here, clearly timing and location have only become issues because we continue to learn from these messages from the Chinese that they still don't believe that their comprehensive trade one or Phase 1 agreement has been reached at this point.
And again, I continue to learn from you because you're the person who pointed out all this window dressing about where it is. Absolutely right, Jeffrey. It's about getting that deal. And again, I'll just go back to what I added to this as well. Comprehensive Phase 1. What is comprehensive Phase 1? Phase 1 is the bits that aren't comprehensive because they're the only bits you can agree on. Comprehensive is the whole trade deal we were promised originally. Don't get it. Anyway, let's move on. Siemens. We spoke to Joe Case earlier on. They were very interesting. 24% higher over the last 3 months. That is a huge rally for one of the bulwarks of European and German business. Now, Siemens, though, wait for this, is forecasting a gloomy economic outlook for 2020. It beat fourth quarter numbers. They were good numbers. They were unambiguously good numbers. But the German conglomerate saw industrial operating profit jump 20% in the quarter thanks to an uptake in larger orders. But is expecting a decline in short-cycle businesses over the next 12 months due to geopolitical and economic risks. And I thought Annetta and Jeff's interview with Joe Case was fascinating. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I love the way the market is saying we like the actual numbers rather than worrying about the outlook. Because very often, Annetta, you and I will be standing here and there'll be an opposite movement and we're saying, well, the market's ignored the real numbers and has concentrated on the outlook. So fascinating psychology going on here between the investor and the company.
Yeah, that's probably true. Probably also the market is thinking it could actually be worse, because looking at the competitors of Siemens, they are in a much worse place, such as ABB and also General Electric. We don't need to talk about them because they really had a loss in the last quarter. So I guess what Joe Kaeser has done to Siemens is very much liked by the markets, to like split the company up in sort of a fleet structure. Also the plan to now list the energy business next year, and that they're also sticking to the plan. And in that interview, he was also saying it's not like a gloomy outlook. It's just realistic to say that obviously the economic situation will not be better than now next year, because we are headed towards a cyclical downturn. And clearly that mainly is affecting their so-called short cyclical business, which is mainly the automotive and machinery industries, which obviously is hit worse by the current economic scenario. So that's what Joe Kaeser actually was saying about the outlook. Take a listen here.
We expect short cycle businesses in the market to be somewhat flattish or down, but we have a forecast that it should be about level as to last year. We do accept some weakness in the first couple of quarters where we believe that the short cycle businesses are flattening out, and we do expect a recovery in the second half of the year. So that gets us to the guidance, which we this time have actually been detailing very much.
Everybody needs somebody.
At Amazon, find everything you need to make the kids smile this Christmas. You can get items like the LOL Surprise 2-in-1 Blamper, Monopoly with electronic voice banking, and the Barbie 3-story townhouse. All with low prices and free UK delivery on eligible orders over £20. So there'll be more, and more.
Wow, thanks, Mum and Dad.
Amazon, delivering all you need for the kids for less.
Is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right. Use it. To learn more, visit hud.gov/fairhousing. That's hud.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Just because you travel doesn't mean you can't keep your routine. The more obstacles travel puts between us and our well-being, the more we strive to sleep well. At Westin Hotels and Resorts, we're focused on empowering your well-being. With our award-winning Heavenly Bed, you can get the restorative sleep you need and meet the challenges of the day head-on. Don't leave your well-being behind. We give you the choice to get up or to rise. Search Westin online to find out more. Westin, let's rise.
At Argos, get them the toys they're dreaming of this Christmas. Save 20% when you spend £20 or more on toys with code TOYS20, including top brands like Peppa Pig and Lego. Enjoy same-day home delivery 7 days a week. With Argos, you're good to go. Offer ends the 12th of November, subject to availability. Exclusions apply. Delivery conditions apply. Order by 6 p.m, 90% UK coverage.
This winter, why not take the short flight from London to Dublin with Aer Lingus from just $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. From coastal walks to cosy pubs and friendly locals, you'll find so much to enjoy once you're there. Smart takes a Dublin city break. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at aerlingus.com. Terms and conditions apply.
The S in Audi S-Line stands for many things like sporty, stylish, streamlined, and now seductively priced. Like the new Audi A4 S-Line, which you can now have from £359 per month, £2,154 initial rental. Test drive one at your local Audi centre, but you'll have to be swift. The offer ends soon. Search Audi S-Line. Audi, Vorsprung durch Technik. With 48-month contract hire, 10,000 miles per annum, 18s and over, subject to status, damage charges may apply, no ownership. Ordered by 31st of December 2019 from participating centres. Audi Financial Services, visit audi.co.uk.
Ladies and gents, may I introduce a magical number? 25! Oh yes, 25 UK millionaires guaranteed in this Friday's Euro Millions.
Euro Millions, celebrating 25 years of the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and come to the shops with me. We can get 10% off 2 big shops a month with the new Tesco Club Card Plus. Oh, and 10% off your favourite Tesco brands, including F&F in-store every day. All for $7.99 a month.
New Tesco Club Card Plus. Value you can't stop talking about. Subscribe online from the 8th of November. £200 max spend per shop. In-store spend only. Club card app required. Exclusions apply. See online for details.
Will cancer affect my sex life?
Your sex drive can disappear. The side effects may stop you.
Your sex life can easily stay.
When you search one question about cancer, you end up with millions of results which contradict each other. For clear and uncomplicated information, come to Cancer Research UK. Visit us online or give us a call on 0808 800 40 40. Cancer Research UK. Together, we will beat cancer.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Naira Chahich with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. We're 47 minutes into the equity market open and still in the green on the Stock 600, up almost 0.4%, up for a fifth day. Looking across the regional indices, you're seeing all of them really in the green. FTSE 100 and CAC 40 up by at least 0.3%. The IBEX higher by 0.5%. The DAX and FTSE MIB both higher by at least 0.7%. And futures also turning positive in the US since we got the headline from China saying that China and the US have agreed to a phased tariff rollback. We'll discuss the details in a moment, but US futures on the front foot. S&P minis up 0.4%, Dow and Nasdaq futures up 0.5%. It's also spurred a turnaround in the bond market because the 10-year Treasury yield was falling in the Asian session, where 1.5 basis points higher now. We hit a 185 handle. The 10-year Bund yield up a basis point, -32. The 10-year gilt yield up a basis point at 73 basis points. But of course, that could all change for the gilt yield when we get the decision from the Bank of England later. Not so much the decision that might change much, unless, of course, we do get one vote for a rate cut, but more the guidance from Mark Carney in the Monetary Policy Report. Do we see the hawkish bias taken away? What might we hear in terms of the future outlook? A number of market participants expecting cuts in 2020 and positioning for that along the gilt curve. Looking at FX, we saw the yen strengthen in the Asian session on a bit of a safe haven bid, but it's given up those gains. Dollar yen is flat now at 108.95. On those headlines on trade, we've also seen yuan strength, the onshore and offshore strengthening past 7. The offshore right now trading at 698.52, and oil also catching a bid. WTI up 0.6%, Brent up 0.5%, trading at $56.72 and $62.07 a barrel, respectively. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Naira, thank you. Greece is weighing a new flat tax in a bid to attract wealthy foreigners. Individuals will pay a flat rate of €100,000 as long as they invest $500,000. That's over 3 years. The scheme is part of a larger tax reform program. It includes lower rates for business and households and a one-off tax of 15% on stock options. The latest opinion poll by YouGov shows the Tories' lead has dropped slightly. The Conservatives are on 36, down 2 percentage points, meaning they now have an 11-point advantage over Labour. The survey has the Lib Dems on 17, Brexit Party on 11, Greens on 5, SNP on 4, and Plaid Cymru on 1. And finally, hotels in Singapore are trialling the use of facial recognition technology to speed up check-in times and boost staff productivity. The system enables visitors to use mobile devices to verify their identity, eliminating the need for manual checks, and is claimed to be cutting waiting times by as much as 70%. Tourism accounts for about 4% of Singapore's GDP. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Look, there's many directions we could take that last story, but I want to focus on the obsession that we have in modern times with saving time and cutting down time. And one bugbear that I have is when I go to buy my lunch and I constantly am asked, have you got us on an app so that you can book the lunch and then just come in and pick it up? And my response is always, if a day arrives where I do not have time to go out and choose my lunch and buy my lunch, I've got problems.
I agree with you.
Could be coming down the line. Everything. But what do we do with all this time that we save?
Well, exactly. We spend it on social media. That's my point.
Well, I just love
downloading more stuff on apps, downloading more time-saving apps.
Yes. Well,
I just love wasting time in my life talking to people at the till. It's brilliant, isn't it? Talking to people at the check-in. That's what it's all about. Maybe they will upgrade your room if you're nice to them.
Yes.
Well, someone who doesn't waste time at all, of course, is our next guest. Freddie Late, CIO at Latitude Investment. Welcome, Freddie. And yes, well, time, I guess, is going to be the big issue for the next, few hours until we hear from the US on the China prospects of a phased rollback in terms of tariffs. I mean, we're hearing it all from the Beijing end at the moment. It's clearly having a huge effect on markets, as we just heard. How are you reading? I mean, do you think this is basically the way out of the crisis, the trade war in effect?
I think you have to slightly cut through the noise, because I mean the swings in the market last night, this morning, they're all quite large. But at the end of the day, you have to sort of take a call on what you think, not necessarily what you think it should happen, because that's often the stupidest thing to imagine might happen in macroeconomic scenarios, but what you think will happen. And I feel like, China have had to sort of settle for a little bit of a sort of, retribution or yield on a few points. But I've never thought personally that it gets to a hugely more intense level of trade war. I think one grand deal is very unlikely. So I think it will be rollbacks here, changes in IP law here, changes in trade here, something for the farmers, something for the coal producers, whatever it might be. And I continue to believe that we won't have anything that even resembles a grand deal until next year. But it's nice to see, nonetheless, a little bit of a sort of phase one coming back to us in terms of the market. None of us want to see this great trade war being something looming over us as investors. It gives a lot of uncertainty because there's always a tail risk. Yeah. And I think that something like this, were it to be true, and were some of the conditionals in the language to prove to follow through, this will be sufficient, actually, that the market can sort of park the trade war for a large degree. And we can say, look, they will continue to negotiate, but we can potentially look through it and stop trading stocks as if they're just China proxies. Let's look at it, what its underlying fundamentals are.
It's interesting, Freddie, that you were saying that this might show that China's conceded on some points, because China has actually been the one that's been asking for the rollback and putting that as a stipulation for even meeting to talk about phase one for quite a while. So actually, could this be President Trump ceding ground? Could it be? And if it is, does that make the outlook even more positive? How would that change your view on what happens in 2020?
Yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. But, I mean, these tariffs hurt both sides, but they do hurt China more. And I think that's the key thing. So, of course, they want to bring them back. And look, it is still a negotiation, despite him having being the greatest artist of the deal. There still has to be a negotiation. You still have to give a little bit. So the idea that you roll back the tariffs, but a couple of concessions get through from the American side is probably how I anticipate it playing out.
It's interesting you say it hurts China more, but in fact, of course, Donald Trump has the time ticker. Time seems to be a theme in this part of the programme. Yeah. But that is going towards 2020. President Xi can to some extent stand back. He hasn't got a phased election. But Donald Trump does, and really quite soon. He needs to have good figures, a good look before the election comes.
That's true, and maybe February, March next year he needs to try and pull a rabbit out of a hat. The thing is, I do believe he can. I think it's in his sort of gift to pull that rabbit out of the hat. If he made a big concession, he stepped down and Nero just suggested and said, actually, we're going to be grand about this. We're going to go back to having a wonderful deal with China, and actually we're going to be open to their trade and whatever else. You can still say you've won in a lot of senses. It doesn't, and actually, I think it's in his gift. So the timing is his choice.
And that means what for how you would invest towards the end of the year and into 2020? Does it make you more positive, for example, on semiconductor stocks, on cyclically exposed stocks, and just generally much more positive on equities?
Yeah, so we're fortunate at Latitude. We tend to take a view that we'd rather invest in businesses with their own self-direction as opposed to ones that are heavily geared to macroeconomic outputs or inputs. So we don't tend to invest in those heavily cyclical sectors. We have in the past bought into semiconductors. So, for our stocks, it's business as usual. There's an, movement around share prices, but that's fine and tolerable. If I were to answer your question more accurately, if I thought slightly differently about things, I think those sorts of stocks will probably do well over the next sort of 6 to 12 months. There are a lot of cheap industrial stocks in the world, semiconductors in certain areas, probably the sort of higher end, not the memory guys. But, there's opportunities for them to do well over the next 6 to 12 months, yeah.
What about the US economy more generally? We had some interesting comments from Charles Evans overnight, Chicago Fed boss, saying that it was, he said the US economy was in a good place. He was saying it's all basically working. He said the directions are right. There's been others saying, well, maybe not, and some doubts about the future jobs data and the strength of the consumer. How are you reading that now?
I still read it as good as well. There's lower growth than we might have been accustomed to for the last sort of 20 years or 10 years. But there's still positive growth. And while you've got very easy monetary policy, which we still do have, bond yields are only 1.8, even though they've rallied. Bond yields have rallied. You've got more fiscal easing coming, I'm convinced, over the next 3 to 5 years from all of the developed market economies. You know, look at the general election in the UK. It's being fought on a battleground of spending from both sides. And so I think you'll have lots of fiscal easing, lots of monetary easing, already both quite easy, and full employment, and a genuine belief that, you know, capitalism's biggest fault is it hasn't supported the labour force enough, if you want to oversimplify it. I believe that can get rectified from the top to a degree by maintaining jobs and trying to create jobs, which is all Donald Trump won his election on. So you end up with full employment and easy financial conditions. It's a pretty good recipe for an economy. That said, we are late stage, productivity growth is low, demographics are worse, and, you know, there's a relative headwind. So I think it's low growth. It's not huge growth. There's no boom, but there's no bust.
Yeah, the productivity data out of the US just yesterday did cause some concern. But, you know, it's interesting because in the past couple of weeks or so, people have started asking questions whether we're finding a bottom in the global manufacturing cycle. And I've actually had conversations with people over the past couple of days who think that the next move from the Fed could be a hike. That's not what the market's pricing, but that's what they're saying. And I spoke to someone this morning who said even the Bank of England could hike in 2020. Do you think that's a possibility for those two central banks in 2020?
I do think it's a possibility, I think no one's talking about it. Everyone's assuming what I just said, which is, you know, easy monetary policy, easy fiscal policy. And the market always does what you don't expect, slightly. So expect the unexpected. And the one key thing is that people have stopped talking about inflation. No one's really talking about inflation. But core inflation in the US is still reasonably high, up towards 2.5%. Yet break-even inflations are down at sort of 1.6. And I think those could move up substantially, which have a change on repricing financial assets across the world.
Freddie, thank you very much. Freddie Late there, CIO at Latitude Investment, joining us here in the studio. And coming up, Matt Miller and Anna Edwards are back on Daybreak Europe, speaking to Tamar Hayat, Chief Operating Officer at PGIM. It's coming up to the top of the hour. You're listening to Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
Oh my God, OMG. Is she okay?
Yeah, she always does this. Her Uber Eats just arrived. She ordered McNuggets, so...
Shall I get the door then?
Probably best, yeah.
McDonald's delivered, exclusive to Uber Eats. Get excited.
This is the sound of Helen and Peter, hiking to the fairy-tale fortress high above the winter wonderland below. Or it would be, if they hadn't stopped at the first beer house they came to. There it is, Helen and Peter. There's your Incredible. Fly from London Gatwick to Salzburg from £29 each way. With British Airways, Incredible is within reach. Terms and conditions apply. Limited availability and dates. Fare quoted is each way based on a return. cba.com/Gatwick for details.
Spot a bargain in the Debenhams Spectacular event. Up to 30% off throughout the store and up to 15% off beauty and fragrance. Shop now in store and at debenhams.com.
Teaching shapes lives. If you're considering a career in teaching, you could be eligible for a £26,000 tax-free training bursary. Find out about the financial support to help you start your career in the classroom. Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Search Get Into Teaching. Bursary subject to eligibility. Selected subjects only.
Ladies and gents, may I introduce a magical number? 25! Oh yes, 25 UK millionaires guaranteed in this Friday's Euro Millions.
Euro Millions, celebrating 25 years of the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from Frankfurt, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio. I am here.
Explain yourself.
Because, well, there's a number of reasons, actually. Yesterday, I came in to talk to Karl von Rohr, the Deputy CEO of Deutsche Bank. Then I ran over to the ECB to talk to the Chair of Supervision, Andrea Enria. And today I'm going to go over to Commerzbank to interview the chief finance officer there, Stefan Engels, after they cut their profit outlook, or their basically, we used to call these profit warnings. I think it was outlawed at some point to use that terminology, but that's what it is. They're not going to make as much money now in 2019 as they thought they were earlier this year.
Yeah, indeed. So we look forward to that conversation that Matt is going to hold there. In the meantime, let's check the data. It is, it's just gone 9 o'clock here in London, just gone 10 o'clock if you're in Paris or Berlin, and we check the data for you every 15 minutes. Let's get to it, because we've had this great headline across the Bloomberg, great for risk assets, I should say. This was around an hour and a half ago, wasn't it, Matt? China says that the US agrees to phase tariff rollback if a deal is reached. So this has opened up the opportunity of at last starting to talk about and seeing some rollbacks of tariffs that have been imposed since the start of these US-China tensions. And so as a result of that, we saw risk appetite surge, we saw Asian equities go higher, we saw US futures climb, European futures climbed, and now European stocks are climbing. So the Stock 600 up by 0.4%, the FTSE 100 up by 0.4%, the CAC 40 and the Xetra DAX also higher. In fact, the Xetra DAX up by around 0.8%. Autos and auto parts, one of the biggest gaining sectors, and of course that plays well for the German business model. Of course, gains here being slightly tempered by the fact that we don't have any firm date or location for any kind of signing, and we are still only talking about phase one of a trade deal, not some kind of grand bargain. But nevertheless, the mood music is more positive. Let's check some other assets for you, and we've got oil prices a little bit weaker this morning, down by around 0.9% on WTI. Similar moves on Brent. The yield on the US 10-year is up, as you might expect. So we've got money coming out of govies and going into equities. So we're at 1.848 is where we trade on the US 10-year. The dollar, a little less attractive, down 0.1%. We see a little bit of a move higher in the euro, up around 0.1%. The pound, incidentally, against the US dollar is pretty flat, up just 0.1% this morning, Matt.
All right, so that's a look at your data. We check it for you every 15 minutes. Right now, I want to talk about market sentiment getting a huge boost this morning, at least it was momentarily. China's Ministry of Commerce said China and the U.S. agreed to lift tariffs in phases as their trade deal progresses. Bond yields were moving lower. We had stock, equity indexes moving much higher. And now we're joined by Tamer Hyatt, the Chief Operating Officer at PGIM. Tamer, you advise institutional clients on what to do with their portfolios. How are you advising them in this environment? What do you make, first off, of the announcement from the Chinese Ministry of Commerce?
Well, I think all our clients will enjoy the relief rally that is happening. I don't think this was entirely unexpected, although it's probably a little more favorable than our base case. But with U.S. elections looming in 2020, and with President Xi trying to hit a 6 to 6.5% GDP growth target, it seemed inevitable that there would be some attempt to put a brakes on the trade tariffs, and I think the reversal is actually more positive. Our institutional clients actually take a slightly longer-term view, and I would say there's still some shadows that we shouldn't forget about, despite the silver lining of the latest phase announcement. And that's the fact that there will be elections in November 2020, and in the U.S. after that, there may be a tightening of trade. And ultimately, we think this is about an incumbent power in the U.S. and a rising power in China, and China's strategic threat to the U.S. will remain, and intellectual property, the battle between a rising power and an incumbent power, and the game theory that implies will mean that these tensions will come back. We think this is a pause. It may be a pause all the way for a year, but this will return as a major theme for several years, and our institutional investors take a longer-term view of that, Nick.
Tamer, do you think we've seen peak globalization then?
We do not think we've seen peak globalization. We've seen the benefits of globalization being so unequally shared across the world and with the working class populations in developed markets that you've seen this lashback of nationalism. We think this will take a long time. There will be lots of volatility along the way, but ultimately there'll be a return to more globalization because the trade benefits and the economic benefits, if adequately shared, are tremendous.
So when do you see a final deal actually getting made? I mean, and what do you think the end result is going to look like?
We've tried, sort of given up trying to predict the very binary outcomes that can happen, Nick, in these sort of talks. You can see how one tweet can completely turn around markets. However, we gave a very high probability. Obviously, there are talks in December, right, if they find a venue. But we would still give a very high probability that latest by the end of Q1 2020, we will have this phase of the trade talks pretty sealed, because again, President Xi needs that for his local political environment and his growth goals, and President Trump needs that because he definitely doesn't want the backdrop of a declining market and financial economy state leading up to the elections. The trade tariffs even cost the U.S. economy about 1/3 of 1 percentage points of GDP. That's pretty substantial. I don't think the U.S. administration wants that going into the elections in 2020.
We talked to a guest on Bloomberg TV a little bit earlier on, Tamer, and we were asking about how his portfolio would be impacted by this kind of trade news, and he was suggesting that not much, because he deliberately crafted a portfolio that really downplayed exposure to trade tensions. Have you done something similar? Does your portfolio, your clients' portfolios, do they reflect an avoidance of these of stocks that are exposed to global trade?
I mean, the first thing I'll say is, it's funny how asset managers now are hiring political scientists rather than economists to understand things, because just the geopolitical risk has become much higher up the agenda. So we spend a lot more time thinking about what these risks will do, and absolutely try to make our portfolios more resilient to it. Our bigger worry about China, actually, and that does affect how we position our portfolios, is not just the tariffs and the price that they're taking on the economy, but just debt sustainability more generally. And when you look at interest costs versus nominal GDP in China, that's a trend I think all investors should look at. And that means that there are probably other headwinds to think about beyond the trade tariffs where China is positioned right now.
What's your best idea right now, Tamer? What do you get up and what gets you totally psyched in the morning in terms of investing in these markets?
Well, I think about sectors in my role rather than specific stocks or securities. And I would say, while there's been lots of concern around all the earnings news we've got from Q3 earnings, the slowdown in manufacturing, the softening in even consumer sentiment, sort of a technical earnings recession in Germany, what excites us is the dynamism we still see, even though there's some overpricing in private markets. The beating heart of entrepreneurialism and capitalism is increasingly private markets. We see companies that are much heavy in intangible assets, data, software, brand, design, proprietary technologies driving growth, rather than all the capex measures that we spend a lot of time talking about. And I think investors should be thinking much more seriously about private debt as a way of accessing a series of opportunities that are just not coming to public markets any longer.
A growing theme. We talked about this a little bit earlier on, didn't we? Danny Berger was at a conference on that very subject this week. Tamer, thank you very much. Tamer Hyatt, Chief Operating Officer at PGIM, joining us here in studio.
All right, let's get the world national news now. For that, we go to Leanne Gerrans. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. Let's start here in the UK. In the opening days of the general election contest, both of Britain's main political parties have stumbled. Bloomberg's Tim Ross has all those details.
On Wednesday, Boris Johnson's Welsh secretary resigned. He was the first cabinet minister to be forced to quit during a campaign for more than 100 years. Then Labour's deputy leader, Tom Watson, who's clashed with Jeremy Corbyn over the direction of the party in recent times, announced he's also leaving frontline politics. In London, Tim Ross, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Spying for Saudi Arabia, that's what two former Twitter employees have been charged with, along with the Saudi national. They've been accused of helping the kingdom monitor dissidents. Twitter says it's committed to protecting those who use its service. It's applauding the Justice Department's actions. Crossing over to Hong Kong, the stabbing of a lawmaker on Wednesday is the latest sign of violence as the city, gripped by protest, prepares to hold a tense local election. Bloomberg's Ian Marlowe says those could now be cancelled in a blow to the former colony's a fragile democracy.
On Wednesday, a pro-Beijing lawmaker known for his inflammatory comments against protesters was stabbed on the street while campaigning. Earlier this week, a pro-democracy candidate had a piece of his ear bitten off in a vicious brawl. Both men are seeking one of more than 450 district council seats up for grabs on November 24th. In Hong Kong, Ian Marlowe, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And finally, Greece is weighing a new flat tax in a bid to attract wealthy foreigners. Individuals would pay a flat rate of €100,000 as long as they invest $500,000 over 3 years. The scheme is part of a larger tax reform program. It includes lower rates for business and households and a one-off tax of 15% on stock options. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's Lewis Mason.
Tottenham have taken a huge step towards the last 16 of the Champions League with a 4-0 win at Red Star Belgrade. Heung-min Son scored twice for Spurs in Serbia. Manchester City had goalkeeper Claudio Bravo sent off as they missed the chance to secure their place in the next round, drawing 1-1 with Atalanta. Raheem Sterling had put Pep Guardiola's side in front before the Italian team equalised early in the second half. Arsenal boss Unai Emery admits there's plenty of room for improvement in his team. They let in a late equaliser to draw 1-1 with Vitória Guimarães in the Europa League yesterday. Saracens chairman Nigel Ray says the club will fight against the punishment they've received after being found in breach of the salary cap. The Rugby Union Premiership champions are appealing against a 35-point deduction and £5 million fine for avoiding the regulations. The salary cap means clubs can't spend more than £7 million on players' salaries.
Thanks very much to Lewis for that. Now with your US sports roundup, here's Pete Fox.
On the ice at MSG, the Rangers jumped out early on the Red Wings. Tony DeAngelo got the scoring started. Chris Kreider backed it up. And then Ryan Strom added to their lead. They would cruise to a 5-1 win on the hardwood. Knicks were on the road, obviously, facing the Pistons in Detroit, losing by 20. Julius Randle would finish with 20. The Pacers took care of the Wizards in Indy at Bankers Life Fieldhouse, 121-106. And the Rockets, no problem with the Warriors, 129-112 at the Toyota Center. Alec Burks off the bench with 28. James Harden finished the night with 36. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC Sports Update.
Thanks very much to Pete for that. Now, here's a look at what you should be watching out for later on today. Starting with the rate decision from the Bank of England. No change in policy is expected, but we will get a press conference with the Governor, Mark Carney, of course. Euro area finance ministers meet to pick a new ECB board member and discuss economic forecasts. Also, could banking union be on the agenda, given comments we've heard this week on that subject from Germany? Talking of Germany, could Germany be stabilising? We'll be watching for industrial production numbers. In fact, we've got some industrial production numbers a little bit earlier on, painted a slightly more negative picture than the factory orders we got yesterday, but that no doubt will feature in the Euro area finance ministers' conversation. So that's a look at what is still to come. In terms of what's coming up on this programme, still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we'll talk about the banking sector. We'll be joined by Bloomberg Opinion. Commerzbank cuts its outlook. UniCredit posts a better than expected profit rise. Lots to discuss. This is Bloomberg.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You knew the risks when you decided to drive drunk. There could be a crash. People could get hurt or killed. But that didn't stop you, did it? You knew you could get arrested. You could incur huge legal expenses, and you could possibly even lose your job. You were well aware of the consequences of driving drunk. But one thing's for sure. You were wrong when you said it was no big deal. Drive sober or get pulled over. This message brought to you by NHTSA.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. That's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
U.S. stocks climbed to all-time highs on Monday, following reports the U.S. and China are closing in on a partial trade deal. Joining us now is Kramer Capital Research CIO Hillary Kramer. Hillary, great to have you back. So, of course, it doesn't hurt that about 80% of S&P 500 companies that have reported have beat EPS estimates. So I have to wonder how much of this rally has to do with the good news on trade and how much because of earnings.
Generally, it's this optimism around the trade deal solving all problems, being the be-all and end-all. You know, earnings were good; they were decently strong. But once it took off after the first week, and we heard some good news from J.P. Morgan, the banks, and then the industrials reported. It was already baked in once we got all of that, and then it's all just been like, okay, great, we're going to have a signed phase one deal by month end. Let's just bring these, let's take the indices to the next highest level.
Valuations keep moving higher. So what will it take to sustain this rally?
Well, the Fed would have to keep cutting, and the Fed isn't going to keep cutting. I mean, there is dovishness, but we're not going to have a cut in December. And so the reason we have this technology rally, it all just has to do with pure valuation.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Anna Edwards with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. European equity markets being lifted by the latest news headlines around China. We get reports from the Chinese that the US and China are discussing rollback of tariffs as being part of the phase one deal. That would be done in a staged way, and so gains are there and present for European equity markets and risk assets, but a little muted by that staging perhaps, and also by the lack of any date and time on which any phase one talks are going to be signed off. So the Stock 600 up by 0.4%, the FTSE 100 up by a similar margin, the CAC 40 up 0.3%, and the Xetra DAX up 0.8%. Diving into the sector breakdown then on the Stock 600, we see autos and parts is the biggest gaining sector, up by 1.6%. This of course is a sector that's very driven by trade news flow. Basic resources also moves higher, up by 1.4%. Travel and leisure up by 1.2%. To the downside, some of the bond proxies and some of the more less cyclical stocks, so utilities, telecoms, food and beverage, real estate, all at the bottom of the pack, if you like. So utilities down by 0.7%. Checking some other assets for you. US futures point higher, so we do expect to see some gains at the start of the US trading day, and that again being driven by those more positive trade headlines. As a result, we see money coming out of government debt, so out of treasuries, and treasury yields go higher, so we're up at 1.85% on the US 10-year right now. Oil prices have also bounced. They had retreated previously on the back of a report that OPEC Plus were not looking to limit output any further than they have been doing so far, so that's also part of the conversation around the commodities space. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Good morning, Anna. Escalating pressure on Ukraine. That is what one senior diplomat described coming from the White House. The top U.S. envoy in Kiev says he became concerned about the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Echoing previous testimony, he raised red flags about Giuliani's effort to involve Ukraine in an investigation of one of President Trump's political rivals. The longest UK pay slump in 2 centuries is now coming to an end. Living standards are on the cusp of returning to their pre-crisis levels. The Resolution Foundation predicts real basic weekly pay will surpass its 2007 level by the end of the year. But the think tank says it isn't time to be complacent. And finally, Big Ben will sound for the first time in 10 months, and that's happening today. The chimes will be heard at 11 o'clock this morning for a technical rehearsal ahead of Remembrance Sunday. Big Ben was last heard on New Year's Eve as the Elizabeth Tower, where the bell is located. is being refurbished. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Elisa Martinuzzi. After we had Commerzbank cutting its guidance for net income in 2019, Elisa, we had our Frankfurt banking reporter here, Stephen Ahrens, throw together a graphic for us on TV showing this quarter they cut their 2019 profit outlook. Last quarter, Commerzbank cut its 2019 revenue. Q1 2019, they cut their jobs target and their profitability targets. In the fourth quarter of 2018, they cut their revenue for 2020. In the third quarter of 2018, they cut costs and corporate client revenue outlook. I mean, what is going on with this bank?
Well, you're right to point out this trajectory, but I think at the moment what people are also somewhat concerned about is the outlook. At best, the bank is aiming to deliver very meager profitability. They're losing the big profit engine because the plan that they've embarked on sees them selling their Polish business. So there's an awful lot of concern out there from not just from investors but from regulators, we're told, as to how do we even need to get there. So I think what people are focusing on this morning is, as you say, the net income dial back, but also potential headwinds on capital from new rules that are coming in.
And Elisa, is the solution here to all of the issues that the German banks are facing at the moment, is the solution consolidation, or is that just a distraction from the baseline driver, which is negative interest rates?
Well, I think you have to sort of distinguish between the consolidation that people are, talking about mostly at the moment, which is cross-border, and the domestic consolidation. And I think in Germany in particular, which is an extremely competitive, highly fragmented market, players such as Commerzbank would certainly, benefit from a more concentrated market. And, they have looked at making acquisitions, not too long ago, and maybe, that might be the way forward.
Is cross-border consolidation really a possibility right now, Elisa? Because every time I talk to a big CEO, from Jean-Pierre Moustier to Jordi Gual to Ralph Hamers, they always tell me that it's almost impossible to do cross-border M&A.
Well, I think there are, significant constraints still to European banks, growing beyond their own domestic borders, because each nation still requires, capital and liquidity to be held locally, and that means that you're not making the most of the big footprint. Also, bear in mind that consolidation, cross-border consolidation, while it might sound, exciting, it probably doesn't bring an awful lot of cost synergies. So to be able to, to make that work, there's got to be something else, some other, some complementarity or some growth potential that, that stems from beyond just cutting costs.
Meanwhile, Elisa, we have seen one of the sort of success stories of this earnings season has been capital buffers being rebuilt at various banks, from SocGen to UniCredit, and there have been others. How important is that? I suppose that's very important if you're going to think about doing any M&A.
Absolutely, and for European banks, many European banks remain, not too comfortably capitalized, and actually, emerging from the Commerzbank call, earnings call, there's some concern about the new Basel IV requirements and how that's going to feed through capital, and with these share valuations where they are, cross-border deals, deals in general become very difficult when you're constrained from a valuation or from a capital standpoint.
All right, Elisa, thanks so much for joining us. Elisa Martinuzzi, there from our opinion team. You can get her work and the work of her colleagues by typing OPIN GO on the Bloomberg terminal.
Straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, not cleared. The German finance minister's plans for a deeper EU banking union were not run past Angela Merkel. Matt's been on the case getting into this story this week. We'll get more. This is Bloomberg.
With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. Los Angeles Chargers owner Dean Spanos vehemently denies a report that the NFL team was possibly moving to London. Spanos told the Los Angeles Times, "We're playing in LA. This is our home. This is where we're planning to be for a long blank time. Period. Okay?" After spending 56 years in San Diego, the Chargers moved to Los Angeles in 2017. The team has been playing in a 27,000-seat facility in Los Angeles County designed for Major League Soccer's LA Galaxy. Next year, the team will move into a new stadium and share it with the Rams. Adidas CEO Casper Rorsted poured some cold water on the buzz surrounding carbon fiber-plated running shoes, which have been spearheaded by rival Nike and worn by professionals smashing world records. Rorsted told reporters the real money comes from selling shoes to the running masses rather than creating to the highest ranks of the sport. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Join us in New York City on November 21st as Bloomberg Pursuits convenes the second annual The Year Ahead Luxury. Speakers include Jennifer Hyman, CEO Rent the Runway, Alessandro Bogliolo, CEO Tiffany & Company, Robert A.M. Stern, renowned architect. Supporting sponsor, Diamond Producers Association. Participating sponsor, St. Regis Hotels and Resorts. For more information, go to BloombergLive.com/TYA Luxury. Invitation code RADIO.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation, but while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit burdenllp.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do. Asset management.
It's another Thursday morning. Yet another windy day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick to see spectacular coral reefs and white sand beaches. Fly from London Gatwick to Mauritius with British Airways, with flights and 7 nights hotel from just £949 per person. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun. With British Airways, incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
Just because you travel doesn't mean you can't keep your routine. The more obstacles travel puts between us and our well-being, the more we strive to work well. At Westin Hotels and Resorts, we're focused on empowering your well-being. With Westin Meetings, you work and feel your best with nutritious snacks and nourishing smoothies that give you the energy you need to power through any meeting. Don't leave your well-being behind. We give you the choice to get up or to rise. Search Westin online to find out more. Westin, let's rise.
In cinemas November 15.
So you're going to build a car to beat Ferrari? With a Ford. Correct.
Get ready for Le Mans 66.
I hate guys like us because we're different.
Starring Matt Damon and Christian Bale.
What are they doing? Making your car go faster. That's more like it!
Based on the incredible true story.
You got a plan? It's high risk.
Of Ford versus Ferrari.
No, I thought the whole point was to win the damned race.
Le Mans 66.
Hit it.
In cinemas and IMAX November 15.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
This weekend, Volvo are offering 0% APR finance on a Volvo Select approved used car, which means this weekend, 0% of your morning run playlist will be listened to. So visit your local Volvo retailer this weekend and drive home an approved used car with 0% APR finance. You could run there, if you like.
Available on used vehicles up to 4 years old. Participating retailers. 50% minimum deposit on minimum finance amount of £7,000. Conditional sale, terms and conditions apply. Finance subject to status. 18 plus. Guarantee may be required. Volvo Car Financial Services.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the German finance capital of Frankfurt. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. I'm in London. You're listening to Bloomberg at Daybreak Europe. It's just gone 9:30 here in London. Just gone 10:30 if you're in Paris, Berlin or Frankfurt, where Matt finds himself today.
Yeah, and we're here because I'm going to go over to speak with the CFO of Commerzbank. They've cut their profit outlook once again, so bad news for the bank, but good news for the markets today. The Japanese Ministry of Commerce put out a statement saying that they have agreed with the U.S. to start ratcheting down tariffs ahead of the Phase 1 agreement expected to be signed. Well, it was expected this month, Wilbur Ross told us a while back. Maybe it won't be until December because they can't find a place to do it. In any case, as a result of that, we see gains across equity indexes. The DAX up more than 100 points right now. 13,282 is the level there. The FTSE 100 up 0.4% to 74.26. And in terms of U.S. futures, we see big gains there as well. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ minis all up about 0.5%. The safe haven trades, as you'd expect, are not bid right now. In fact, investors are selling their 10-year treasuries, the yield floating up to 1.8514%. So 10-year treasuries on the rise. The dollar can now buy more than 109 Japanese yen, and you only need $1,485.59 to buy 1 troy ounce of gold. A euro going for 110.77, the pound at 128.67. Don't forget there's a Bank of England decision later on today, and oil trading for $62.40 a barrel.
So let's look at the data. Let's talk about a subject that we've been revisiting a number of times this week. The German Finance Minister Olaf Scholz's push to break the gridlock on EU banking market integration will get a reality check when he meets euro area counterparts today in Brussels. But even if finalising the project remains an uphill battle, there's one thing Scholz has already achieved. He's put banking union on the front pages again.
We cannot afford the deadlock any longer. It affects the functioning of our internal market, and it affects the trust of EU citizens in our ability to solve problems, even those problems that we have fully acknowledged.
That was the German Finance Minister Olaf Scholz talking about his plans for a deeper EU banking union, talking about that this week. For more, let's go live to Brussels, where Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo is standing by. And Maria, I'm not sure whether the barriers to this lie in Brussels or whether they lie in Berlin, but let's think about that and how much momentum there really is behind Scholz's proposal.
Well, there's a number of things here. He is making headlines because this is almost Scholz trying to own the narrative and say Germany is not the country of no. We actually want to take this discussion forward, and we want to have a real banking union. And I'm sure you know everyone in Europe, from CEOs to the European Central Bank to the institutions, they always tell you the only way we're actually going to strengthen the euro area is by having the framework in a way that is effective and in a way that applies to the entire euro region. So now you have the German finance minister saying, I'm okay to take this discussion forward. I think the reaction from other finance ministers today in Brussels will be key, whether they think, okay, we can work with this, or they just feel that this is, in a way, the same proposal with the similar red lines that we've heard before do not work for other countries. So essentially he's doing this to kind of take the discussion forward, but not actually change anything. And the biggest question mark of all, in many ways, is whether this is just him trying to do this as finance minister, whether the German government is actually endorsing this text. They haven't opposed it, which is what people think in a way is good news, but still it's almost unclear whether this is something that is a firm German proposal.
And it almost doesn't matter what the German government wants. I mean, their power has been diminished to the point that it seems like Angela Merkel doesn't even bother to respond to a lot of issues. Mm-hmm. What has been the reaction from countries like Spain and Italy?
Well, that's the reaction that I would say really matters today, because if you look at the details of what Scholz said, is that he still believes that sovereign bonds are not risk-free, and therefore they should not be counted as such by countries like Spain and Italy and the periphery. And this is, again, one of the red lines going into that banking union proposal. So for the Spanish and the Italians have always said there is no way we're going to accept that, because, as you know, their own banks are big holders of their own sovereign debt. So the reaction from those two countries today will be interesting, whether they think they can work with this or they just feel like this is, in essence, the same proposal we've heard before. It doesn't actually take this discussion forward in many ways.
Okay, so a number of barriers to moving this forward. What else is on the agenda then? I know that we've got a lot of talk about the Commission's forecasts. Give us the insight.
Exactly, which is going to come out in, 30 minutes, and that is essentially the verdict for the year. The Europeans were hoping that towards the end of the year, the European economy would gain ground, would pick up. It's of course a question mark whether that is going to happen, so we're going to see whether the Commission is still hopeful that we get that rebound, or they actually just give up and say the outlook is just not getting better, and there's still a lot of uncertainty that's weighing on the European economy. We also want to see the extent, I would say, of the damage done to the German economy because of the trade tension, and we're also looking, or would be looking, at Italy. You have a new government that's pro-European and so on, but the question mark is, fundamentally, has anything changed in the country? Are we going to see any growth that's not just essentially flat? And are they making any progress when it comes to that debt pile and the fiscal situation? So those are two countries that will probably make headlines in about 20 minutes.
All right, we'll look forward to that. Maria, thanks so much for joining us. Maria Tadeo joining us from Brussels. Let's get to Leanne Gerrans now with your global news headlines. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. The US and China may be one step closer to an interim trade deal. Beijing says the two countries have agreed to a phased rollback of tariffs on each other's goods. Since the start of negotiations, China has demanded that President Trump lift punitive tariffs. These duties now apply to the majority of Chinese exports to the US. Here in the UK, the first cabinet resignation during an election campaign in a century. Welsh Secretary Alan Cairns quitting after reports he knew about a former aides role in the collapse of a rape trial. But the opposition Labour Party also suffering a blow. Deputy Leader Tom Watson announcing he's leaving politics after 35 years. He's long clashed with leader Jeremy Corbyn over the direction of the party. The leader of Norway's biggest opposition party has raised eyebrows. He is saying the country should start viewing its $1 trillion wealth fund as a political tool. Bloomberg's Michael Holter reports.
The comments from Labour leader Jonas Gahr Støre are a departure from a consensus among the country's biggest parties that the fund should be shielded from political interference. If Labour comes back to power in 2021, like current polls suggest, it could pave the way for a more activist fund on issues such as climate change. In Oslo, Michael Holter, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Iran has begun enriching uranium at its Fordo research plant in the most dramatic rollback of its commitments to the nuclear deal with world powers. Bloomberg's Yasna Hadoust has the details.
Iran's stockpiles of enriched uranium had already previously exceeded limits set by the 2015 accord, which Tehran has been gradually retreating from after U.S. President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew the U.S. and reimposed crippling sanctions. Nonetheless, this latest move has significantly escalated tensions in the ongoing standoff over the nuclear deal. In Beirut, Yasna Hadoust, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Leanne, thank you very much. Now with your morning sports news, here's Lewis Mason.
Tottenham have taken a huge step towards the last 16 of the Champions League with a 4-0 win at Red Star Belgrade. Heung-min Son scored twice for Spurs in Serbia. Manchester City had goalkeeper Claudio Bravo sent off as they missed the chance to secure their place in the next round, drawing 1-1 with Atalanta. Raheem Sterling had put Pep Guardiola's side in front before the Italian team equalised early in the second half. Arsenal boss Unai Emery admits there's plenty of room for improvement in his team. They let in a late equaliser to draw 1-1 with Vitória Guimarães in the Europa League yesterday. Saracens chairman Nigel Ray says the club will fight against the punishment they've received after being found in breach of the salary cap. The Rugby Union Premiership champions are appealing against a 35-point deduction and £5 million fine for avoiding the regulations. The salary cap means clubs can't spend more than £7 million on player salaries.
Let's get the U.S. sports now with Pete Fox.
From the night on the Hoop scoreboard, the Pacers took care of the Wizards with ease, 121-106 at the Bankers Life Fieldhouse. Bradley Beal, a nice night in the loss, finishing with 30. Rockets rolled the Warriors, 129-112. Alec Burks off the bench with 28, and James Harden led all with 36. And the Pistons handed the Knicks their 5th road loss of the season, 122-102. Julius Randle finishing with 20 on the ice, a battle of 2 of the original 6, as the Rangers had no problems with the Red Wings, 5-1. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC Sports Update.
Thanks very much to Pete for that. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak here, Michael Metcalf, Global Head of Macro Strategy at State Street, will join us. China says US agrees to phase tariff rollback. That's moving the markets. We'll talk to him about that. This is Bloomberg.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
It's another Thursday morning. Yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick to enjoy a warm Bayesian welcome.
How are you doing? Enjoying the sunshine?
Fly from London Gatwick to Barbados with British Airways, with flights and 7 nights hotel from just £699 per person. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun. With British Airways, incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Cold Thursday mornings like this are cruel. You cough, you splutter, so does your car. Its battery dead, killed by an icy claw. Will anyone stand up to winter? Yes, you. Come to Halfords. We fit new batteries on the spot from just £15, and we're open late 7 days a week. See halfords.com for opening hours. Here in Chiswick. Ready for the cold snap? Ready for anything. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Batteries sold separately. Selected vehicles only in most stores.
At Argos, get them the toys they're dreaming of this Christmas. Save 20% when you spend £20 or more on toys with code TOYS20, including top brands like Peppa Pig and Lego. Enjoy same-day home delivery 7 days a week. With Argos, you're good to go. Offer ends the 12th of November, subject to availability. Exclusions apply. Delivery conditions apply. Order by 6 p.m. 90% UK coverage.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Ladies and gents, may I introduce a magical number? 25! Oh yes, 25 UK millionaires guaranteed in this Friday's Euro Millions.
Euro Millions, celebrating 25 years of the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
It's one small step for man, one giant shop. Sorry, 2 giant shops a month at 10% off with the new Tesco Club Card Plus. Oh, and double data from Tesco Mobile, all for $7.99 every month.
New Tesco Club Card Plus. Value you can't stop talking about. Subscribe online from the 8th of November. £200 max spend per shop, in-store spend only, club card app required, exclusions apply, double data only on pay monthly, home from home destinations. First payment payable up front, subject to status, see online for details.
No! The next bus is 18 minutes away.
Look, there's a cab.
We really shouldn't.
Taxi!
I mean, we ate out last night.
Just get in, we're getting soaked.
You're such a bad influence.
You can't always control what you spend, but you can save as you spend with Save the Change. When you use your Lloyds Bank debit card, we'll round up the amount to the next pound and transfer the difference to your nominated Lloyds Bank savings account. Feel in control every day with our mobile banking app. Lloyds Bank, by your side. T's and C's apply.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So we power higher here in Europe. The US Stock 600 up by 0.4%. This as we had the Chinese Ministry of Commerce spokesperson saying that the two countries have agreed to roll back tariffs on each other's goods in phases if and when they do sign that phase 1 trade deal. So European equities are just 1.8% away from the April 2015 record high. That was 414, if you remember. We're currently trading at 406.74 on the US Stock 600. The Xetra DAX, meanwhile, also getting an even bigger boost. Obviously, Germany in the eye of the storm when it comes to trade. We're up 0.8% on the Xetra DAX. In terms of particular stocks of interest, Lufthansa is actually cancelling 1,300 flights, but their share price is up by 3%. There's a cabin crew strike there Thursday, Friday. We also had ArcelorMittal climbing as much as 5% after its earnings beat estimates. In the FX space, the Bloomberg dollar spot index down 0.1%. The yuan rising on that positive trade noise. So the offshore yuan is trading at 6.96. So stronger 0.6%. That's certainly a significant swing. The euro also is gaining 0.1% this morning. The interesting stock market to watch is also the Spanish IBEX, which is up this morning. Higher GDP growth than peers here in Europe, a cheap equity market, and they've got an election on Sunday that may actually remove some uncertainty. So perhaps the IBEX is one for investors to watch. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Goins with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Spying for Saudi Arabia. That's what two former Twitter employees have been charged with. Along with a Saudi national, they've been accused of helping the kingdom monitor dissidents. Twitter says it's committed to protecting those who use its service. It's applauding the Justice Department's actions. Hotels in Singapore are trialing the use of facial recognition technology to speed up check-in times and boost staff productivity. The system enables visitors to use mobile devices to verify their identity, eliminating the need for manual checks, and is claimed to cut waiting times by as much as 70%. Tourism accounts for about 4% of Singapore's GDP. And finally, milkshaking is being recognised in a Brexit-themed list of words and phrases which have entered into common use. Nigel Farage is among public figures who had that drink thrown over them this year. Collins Dictionary's rundown also features no deal, Project Fear, stockpiling and prorogue. Meanwhile, the word of the year is climate strike. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok and Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Matt.
I wish somebody would milkshake me.
Climate strike, that's cheating. That's just two words.
Yeah, I also think that's a bit of a sort of action, isn't it? Climate strike, not so much one word, but I think I'd be a bit scared if someone milkshaked me.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the flavor for me.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, chocolate or banana.
All right, Leanne Gerrans, thanks very much for that. Let's get over to Nathan Hager right now. He's standing by at 7:31 Lex, preparing for Bloomberg Daybreak out of New York. Nathan, what have you got ahead for us?
Far too early for milkshakes this morning, but we are going to continue watching for developments on the U.S.-China trade front. We certainly did get a big one this morning, with China saying both sides are agreeing to roll back tariffs as part of the Phase 1 deal. We're going to get reaction from Ben Emmons, head of global macro strategy at Medley Global Advisors. We also await the decision from the Bank of England, the final one before next month's general election. Brexit still unresolved. We'll bring in Bloomberg senior UK economist Dan Hansen ahead of that policy decision. And plenty of earnings to get to once again this morning, including more disappointing results from European banks and a beat in the chip sector from Qualcomm. So hope you'll join me and Karen Moscow for all that coming up on a coffee-flavored milkshake edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt.
It is Thirsty Thursday, Nathan. Thanks very much. Nathan and Karen coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak. If you're listening on Sirius XM, if you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Coffee milkshake, that must be strictly for early morning radio professionals, I'm sure. Use with caution. Now, turning to trade, that's the big story of the morning, isn't it? Turning to trade, and China and the US have agreed to lift tariffs in phases as the deal progresses. This according to Chinese officials, and it's also subject to the Phase 1 deal being signed. Let's talk about what this means for markets. Michael Metcalf, global head of macro strategy at State Street, joins us. How much does this excite you, Michael, or do you remain sceptical?
Oh, well, morning. Well, look, I think it's certainly positive, the idea that the tariffs could be rolled back. I think that's the first time that we've heard that is a possibility. I think there's been some skepticism about that, whether that would actually happen. And I think we probably just now need to wait to see what the US reaction is to those comments from the Chinese Commerce Ministry.
So has this not been priced in then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that the best that markets were sort of hoping for was a truce, and also that we weren't going to get the escalation in mid-December, and then we had a bit of a curveball last night when it looked like that December decision might be delayed. And look, this is obviously it's headline watching. It's very volatile, but the idea that a Phase 1 deal could be agreed and they could start to gradually roll back the tariffs that are already there. No, I don't think that's fully discounted yet.
It seems that they're trying very hard to find a venue, aren't they, for this? There's been a lot of talk about where this signing could take place. But, Michael, this, of course, has implications not just for the Chinese and US economies, but for the global economy. We've watched the German economic engine be to some extent grounded by these trade tensions, or at least it's sputtering. We got German industrial production today. It continued to worsen. Where are we on the stabilization or not of the European data picture, given the latest data?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we keep thinking that we're there, and arguably we've been saying that for a while now, but the data does continue to disappoint. I think some of the leading indicators at least have begun to stabilize. But look, as you say, I think Germany has been caught in the crossfire of the US trade war, and then obviously and then more directly the threat of Brexit, and so it's understandable that the economy is doing very poorly. That has been discounted. I think markets are beginning to try and pick the turn in Europe now, and they've tried to do that a couple of times this year and been wrong. But if this really is the tipping point in the trade war, then this could be the time.
Pick the turn up, you mean for stocks?
Yeah, well, so I think,
or down for the economy. I mean,
no. I think it's
because we're on the precipice of it seems like a deal in the trade war, but we also see the economy really getting set to tank.
Yeah, well, no, I wouldn't necessarily say set to tank. I think. Look, everything operates with a lag, and the trade war began more than a year ago, and it's only become clearer in the last 6 to 9 months the real economic damage that the tariffs that are already in place have done. And so I think that's why the idea that the current level of tariffs could roll back is such a positive. But it's going to take a long time for that to actually appear in the hard data like we got this morning from Germany.
Yeah, we heard from the Siemens CEO this morning. Joe Kaiser spoke on Bloomberg TV, and he said he expects the downturn to level out over the next 6 months. So we'll see whether that comes to pass. Of course, a big day for the Bank of England, of course, or at least it would be if we had enough clarity on the political picture to pick a way forward for policymakers. But what do you expect, Michael? They just sit on their hands once again, waiting for the fog to clear?
Yeah, I think they have no choice. Although I do think it's interesting that a couple of the speakers were talking about the ongoing uncertainty created by Brexit, and that may be justifying certainly a more neutral stance, and maybe even an ease if it was to drag on for another 6 months, say. So yeah, that would be the kind of language I'd be looking for. It's slightly softer, but certainly no commitment either way.
What are you psyched about right now, Michael? What do you get up and just what makes you whistle your way to work?
Because we spoke to a guest earlier this hour who said private debt markets. So would you say the same, Michael? Or would you pick something else?
No, I'd just be more traditional than that, in the sense that I think that we've had a very negative market narrative all year, and actually market returns have been fine, and I think and in fact in some places they've been even more than fine, and so I would be thinking about trying to get away from your safe haven trades right now. I'd be thinking about looking for yen weakness and just maybe European equities.
Okay, and where would you go to find those then? Which would be the equities that you'd have appetite for? Would it be the ones that have been beaten up by trade tensions, or is it too early to make that play?
No, I think that's exactly where I'd look. It's the undervalued, under-owned, and look, and that's been all because of the trade narrative. And I get the sense, a little bit like your guest that was on earlier before, that global PMIs are going to bottom out, and I think the narrative will begin to change next year, and it will be much less negative.
All right. Very interesting having you on, Michael. Thanks so much for joining us. Michael Metcalf there is the global head of macro strategy at State Street on a day when, Anna, we're really looking at some rallies here in certain equity indexes. They've petered out in others. I mean, the CAC 40 in Paris is now only up about 0.2%, but the DAX index in Frankfurt, where I am, is up still more than 100 points right now, 110 to 13,288.
Yeah, it's interesting to see some of the gains we saw early on coming back. Autos and auto parts now not at the top of the stock 600 gainers board, and that is, of course, a very trade relevant sector to watch. It's up by 1.2% though still, so there is a lot of optimism around this trade story, and we do see US futures continue to point higher, up by between 5 and 0.6%. Nasdaq futures now pointing up by 0.6%.
And we see the defensive sectors are the ones selling off. So utilities, food and beverage, telecoms are where you're seeing the biggest losses. The gainers, by the way, Adidas is a big gainer. We'll talk about this a little bit more tomorrow, but we found out Adidas is introducing a limited edition shoe for the 30th anniversary of the fall of the wall.
It's another Thursday morning, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and explore tropical rainforests. Fly from London Gatwick to Costa Rica with British Airways from £218 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun. With British Airways, incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Spot
What a bargain in the Debenhams Spectacular event. Up to 30% off throughout the store and up to 15% off beauty and fragrance. Shop now in store and at debenhams.com.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and V Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, November 7th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks gain as the U.S. and China take another step forward in trade talks.
Data out of Germany show more weakness in the manufacturing sector.
The Bank of England makes its last policy decision before elections.
Shares of Qualcomm surge as the chipmaker predicts a pickup in smartphone demand.
The top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine will testify publicly next week in the impeachment inquiry. Plus, another Republican rally for President Trump. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. It was New York versus Detroit. The Knicks lost to the Pistons. The Rangers beat the Red Wings. St. John's won its season opener.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are gaining this morning, coming up to 5:01 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 14 points. Dow futures up 153 and NASDAQ futures up 49. The DAX in Germany's up 0.8%. CAC in Paris up 0.3%. FTSE 100 up 0.4%. 10-year Treasury down 9/32. Yield 1.85%. Yield on the 2-year 1.63%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1.4%. Or 77 cents at 57.12 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.5% or $6.70 at 14.8650 an ounce. The euro 1.1079 against the dollar. The yen 109.07. Nathan.
And Karen, the gains we're seeing for U.S. futures and stocks overseas come after another step forward in trade negotiations between the U.S. and China. For the very latest, we go live now to Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Yeah, Nathan, China and the U.S. have agreed to roll back tariffs in phases. That's according to China's Ministry of Commerce, which says the amount of tariff relief would come in the first phase, and that would depend on the content of the agreement. China's commerce spokesman says negotiations remain constructive as the two sides work towards signing a deal in December. Now, if confirmed by the U.S., an agreement to roll back tariffs in phases could provide a roadmap to de-escalate the trade war. Live in New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. Equity, bond, and currency markets all moved on the trade news. The yen hit its weakest level of this session. Treasuries declined, and U.S. futures took a sharp turn higher. Mark Cudmore is global market strategist for Bloomberg.
The talk here of actually a schedule for lowering tariffs is potentially brilliant news. We don't have concrete details yet. We don't have this deal, and of course there may be some more kind of ebbing and flowing in this story before this deal gets signed. So I think that the market, this is good news, and I'm not trying to say negate this good news, but I don't think it's going to continue higher till we get more details. I think we'll hold on to the gains, but ultimately the investors will want to see some concrete points, and that will be A, when this deal will be signed, and B, a schedule for when those tariffs will be removed and how quickly.
The two sides continue to negotiate where and when a Phase 1 deal would be signed. Iowa and Alaska have already been rolled out as sites for a meeting.
Now, before that news on trade, stocks in Asia had been little changed, but optimism on talks pushed equities there into positive territory. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. Well, those reports saw the Hang Seng Index, which was still trading, turn around, and the CSI 300 on the mainland close higher by 0.2%. Shares in Taiwan, though, had already closed. They fell as semiconductor players lost ground, and Australian stocks outperformed as the nation recorded an expansion of its trade surplus and financial stocks lifted on earnings. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliet, thank you. Meanwhile, China is considering a wave of bank mergers to stabilize the nation's small lenders. Sources tell us financial regulators are discussing plans to restructure or merge problematic banks with less than $14 billion in assets. China's small lenders have struggled with bad loans and a government crackdown on risky funding practices.
In Europe, we get a policy decision and updated economic forecasts from the Bank of England today, followed by a press conference by Governor Mark Carney. Here with a preview from London is Bloomberg's Lucy Meakin.
The Bank of England will probably keep interest rates on hold and cut its growth and inflation forecast as Brexit questions continue to plague the economy. The newly renamed Monetary Policy Report will provide the central bank's latest thinking as the UK faces political chaos, lacklustre growth, and no clarity on how its divorce from the EU will be resolved. It will also be the last chance for journalists to grill Governor Mark Carney before he goes into a quiet period ahead of the December election. In London, Lucy Meakin, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Lucy, thank you. In Germany, we have data showing industrial production continues to worsen. German output fell 0.6% in September, with manufacturing fueling the decline. At the same time, the EU warns things could get worse for Europe. The European Commission is cutting its euro area growth forecast for the next 2 years.
Earnings out of Germany don't paint a much better picture. Shares of Commerzbank are down almost 3% now after the bank cut its outlook for the year. Jonathan Tice is a senior bank analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence.
Germany quite clearly continues to be a horrible place to do business. Commerzbank is sort of an M&A play. I would be surprised if it is still independent in 2 years' time. People look at Commerzbank and think fundamentals pretty horrible, but if I wanted to buy an M&A play, it is one of the ones that's top of the list.
And just yesterday, Germany's finance minister reopened debate on consolidation with a proposal to break a deadlock in discussions over European banking integration. That's seen as a necessary step before deals can take place.
In Italy, Unicredit is out with earnings that beat estimates. The bank posted a 26% gain in profit as income from trading and fees offset weak lending margins. Unicredit shares are up 5% in Milan.
Here in the U.S., shares of Qualcomm are up 6% in early trading. The chip maker's out with a forecast that beat estimates and says smartphone demand will pick up next year. Ian King has more from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
They're saying the smartphone market is going to return to growth again. As much as 1.85 billion devices are going to be sold, and more importantly, 5G devices as many as 225 million.
Hitting the top of its revenue range next year would give Qualcomm its first sales expansion in 6 quarters.
And shares of Expedia are down 13% after a decline in revenue at its vacation rental business. Third quarter results missed estimates, and that has Expedia lowering its forecast for the year. Futures this morning are higher. S&P futures up about 14 points. Dow futures up 150. NASDAQ futures up 47. The DAX in Germany is up 0.8%. 10-year Treasury down 10/32, yield 1.85%. Yield on the 2-year 1.63%. And NYMEX crude oil is up 1.2% at $57.02 a barrel. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. And it's 5:07 on Wall Street, and let's bring in Michael Barr to get a check of what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. An aide to Vice President Pence is expected to testify today in the closed-door impeachment hearings. Jennifer Williams was on the president's July 25th call with Ukraine. It comes as William Taylor, the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, told lawmakers that President Trump was withholding military aid for Ukraine unless the country's president agreed publicly to investigate Democrats. Taylor will testify publicly in the inquiry next week. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff.
So those open hearings will be an opportunity for the American people to evaluate the witnesses for themselves, to make their own determinations about the credibility of the witnesses, but also to learn firsthand about the facts of the president's misconduct.
President Trump slammed House Democrats after the news the inquiry was going public.
Corrupt politicians, Nancy Pelosi, and shifty Adam Schiff, and the crooked media have launched the deranged, delusional, destructive, and hyper-partisan impeachment witch hunt.
The president spoke last night in Monroe, Louisiana, rallying support for the state's GOP candidate, Eddie Rispone, who's going up against Governor John Bel Edwards in the last gubernatorial election of the year. Several media outlets say President Trump wanted Attorney General William Barr to hold a news conference to say that Trump didn't break any laws regarding the Ukraine call. However, Barr reportedly declined. Jeff Sessions is said to announce today that he plans to run for the Alabama Senate seat that he vacated in 2017 to become Attorney General. 2 former Twitter employees are accused of using their access at the social media giant to spy for Saudi Arabia. One of the men, a U.S. citizen, is under arrest. The other is believed to be in Saudi Arabia. The men were allegedly recruited to gather personal information on critics of the Saudi regime, including indication of the user's location. Former Homeland Security Advisor Tom Bossert says the Saudi government was looking to punish dissent.
This ought to serve as a wake-up call to not only Twitter, but all the big tech companies. They've become large and powerful, and they are up against highly complex spy operations.
Twitter says it's cooperating with the investigation. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Michael, thank you. It is 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, it's a new season with a lot of new players, but it's the same old Knicks. Worst record in the NBA last season and again so far this year. They are 1-7, lost by 20 at Detroit. Andre Drummond, 27 points for the Pistons. Julius Randle scored 20 for the Knicks. At the Garden, Rangers had 5 different goal scorers, 35 saves from Henrik Lundqvist. They got back to 500. 5-1 win over Detroit. Mike Anderson's the new coach at St. John's, replacing St. John's legend Chris Mullin. First game, 30-point blowout of Mercer. Mustafa Heron with 25 points. The ACC, oddly, starting the season with conference games. So Virginia, the defending national champs, not only playing within the league, but the first defending champ to start the next year on the road since 1967. And Virginia won at Syracuse. And the low-scoring final score was 48-34. In 2018, the Giants had the second pick of the draft, and the Jets picked third. The Giants could have taken Sam Darnold to be their quarterback. They instead took Saquon Barkley. They left Darnold for the Jets. Sunday, the two teams meet, and Giants coach Pat Shurmur was asked about Darnold.
I see an outstanding young quarterback who's, he can play, and he can help his team win games. And so that's what I see.
What did you think about him coming out?
We had a high opinion of him. Thought he was an outstanding player, well-accomplished player that, we were pretty certain he was going to have an outstanding career.
Giants, of course, drafted Daniel Jones a year later. Both young quarterbacks making their share of mistakes on teams that are combined 3-14. The Giants will be without tight end Evan Ingram Sunday, injured foot. The Jets hope to have Le'Veon Bell. He didn't practice due to a knee injury. The Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
And John, in other sports news, we're getting word of a possible buyer for Derek Jeter's Players Tribune. Sources tell us Minute Media is in talks to buy the former Yankee captain's website. We're told the media company is in exclusive negotiations with the Players Tribune, though there is no guarantee discussions will lead to a deal. Latest moves on a U.S.-China trade deal have S&P futures higher by almost 14 points. Dow futures ahead 148, NASDAQ futures a gain of 46. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve?